Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. You are listening to episode 15 of our WNBA Retrospect series, a historical look back at the greatest draft prospects in league history. Today we'll discuss Jewell Loyd, one of the best shooting guard prospects in WNBA history. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
Good! You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. My name is Hunter Cruse. I'm your Saturday host covering the WNBA draft and prospect scouting. I'm joined by my co-hosts M. Adler and Lincoln Shafer. M covers the WNBA with a focus on player development in the game within the game. Lincoln is our biomechanics guru and contributes to our WNBA draft coverage at The Next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, so our conversation subject today is Jewell Loyd out of Notre Dame. Loyd averaged 17 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists across 3 seasons in South Bend before becoming the number 1 overall pick in the 2015 draft to the Seattle Storm, declaring as a junior. Without further ado, Em, let's talk about Loyd's prospects.
The first thing that you notice about Loyd is how smooth of an operator she is at just about everything. Like, if you want a guard to do something, if you want a guard to do something other than, run an entire half-court offense, Jewell does it and does it real well. She's super smooth with it. Her catch and shoot threes are just immaculate. The form is what you picture being on every basketball highlight reel. Her ability to beat people off the dribble, to hit some wild finishes, to really feel her spots in the mid-range, to stop and pop. It's so good. And she has really, really good athleticism to match. Everything here is super projectable. She is... the only player that I think she ever took the court against who was even in the same stratosphere as her in terms of just straight line speed was Mariah Jefferson, and then that just translates into everything. What I talked about with the smoothness, it's how quickly she gets into her form and how quickly she pulls up and how everything is so very stable. And it is just impossible to read what she's going to do, whether it's a pull up, whether it's a drive. It's the footwork in the midair that just comes down perfectly. This is someone who was born to play basketball.
Yeah, and Hunter, you mentioned 17 points a game at Notre Dame, but in her 2 years as the first option in the Notre Dame offense, that number skies up over 19 points per game after Skylar Diggins-Smith graduates. Like Em said, the first thing you notice is just how composed she is. She's never rushed. She's never going at any pace other than her own. And even though she's in this kind of like controlled, almost 3/4 speed most of the time, she still has incredible burst and like just a really creative finishing package that allows her to navigate through the trees and make plays in the paint with other players who are much larger than her.
And the thing that you don't see very often in terms of, players who are this smooth of an operator as a guard as well is just the fact that, not only is she just not making many mistakes on the offensive process, if she does, she usually just pulls it out as opposed to, forcing a passing window open. Defensively, really very few to little mistakes at all either. She has excellent instincts for, one pass away help, which is really what you look for when you have basically just a bang on 2 guard. Her stunts, her digs, her off-ball communication, her ability to fight mismatch. You don't want her to switch, but if she gets switched on, she's really active fighting mismatches. She doesn't foul much, but she's really good contesting drives. There's frankly very, very little you can ask for of a player who, is clearly at least, who clearly is at least your second best, point of attack guard defender at like a professional scale, and also is providing very plus help for a guard.
Yeah, for me, she was maybe more impressive, I was more surprised by her off-ball offense, if anything. I thought elite cutter,
Absolutely.
We're now into more of the synergy era, and whenever she was a senior, she had 93rd percentile as a cutter. That was her third most common play type. That was a big part of her game. There was a game against Florida State. It was the ACC championship, I believe, for the semifinals. She had maybe 3 or 4 backdoor cuts in like a 5 to 6 minutes window. Like she just kept going bang, bang, like backdoor cut on Florida State. Never made any different adjustments to it.
Mhm.
And against someone like Jewell Loyd with everything she can do off ball, and also on ball, just super tough to guard. And like you guys covered, pretty much a complete scorer in every way. And along with her off ball abilities, I thought she had some pretty crazy offensive rebounds too. Like just
Oh,
seeing the
she had a really good vert for her height.
right.
Capital
I mean,
A athlete.
we're in the era of players who, this like sort of like the 2015, 2016, you get like a run of like a bunch of players who are like have ridiculous verts for their height.
Yeah.
And what did you guys think about someone will talk about like prospects of this way is their efficiency. I think that was like probably the main thing with Loyd. She was like a 30% shooter as a senior or as a junior in her last year. What did you guys see? Because for me, even though she was a 30% shooter, I bought the shooting like more than anything. I had no major concern with the mechanics. Really.
I mean, yeah, her last season there is the only season she shot under 39% from 3. And she's
It's the only season that her shooting percentage would not be rounded to 40%.
Exactly. Yeah, and the degree of difficulty on the shots that she's taking is absurdly high, especially her final season at Notre Dame. She's being face guarded, seeing a lot of double teams, and just in not in positions to get easy looks very often. So she's getting these really difficult shots that you assume she's going to get easier shots at the next level, and you see that happen. She is able to score a little bit more efficiently. She still doesn't get to the rim as much as you would want for an athlete of that level. But yeah, I don't have a ton of worries about the shooting. I think there's a little bit of some mechanical cleanup to be done, especially in the pull-up 3, but it's small things. It's small things.
Yeah, and I think as far as all the mechanics, as Lincoln said, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty bang on. With what you were saying about the cutting, and I think this connects pretty well. It's not just how lethal she was on the back cuts, and really filling out when to flash middle, whether it's against man or zone, and all those sorts of things. It's also that she's not perfect, but she is really good and has really good instincts for lifting and drifting along the perimeter, and not even just moving from, let's say, the wing to the corner. It's making those sort of micro adjustments into and out of passing lanes that really maximize your ability to get set quickly, to move into the catch as opposed to moving the catch into you, that allow you, to have the smoothest footwork possible, that allow you to get off your shot as quickly as possible. Her college career did not overlap with Katie Lou Samuelson, but because of the future episodes that we're going to be doing here, I was watching some UConn film that included some Katie Lou Samuelson. I talked about this with Lincoln last night, actually. Jewell's three-point mechanics with, Lincoln, what you were saying about the degree of difficulty, it's almost the exact opposite of Lou, where Lou's hop into her three-point, some people take hops into the three-point shots. It's not, in a vacuum, it's not a good thing and no one should do it. Sometimes it's fine if you're like Ashley Jones, for example. But, with Lou, the way her footwork works is she basically hops on her left foot twice in a row in such a way that it severely limits her ability to shoot quickly and to generate power on her shots. Even though she moves pretty well around the perimeter, with Jewell, it's the exact opposite, where she is just so smooth moving into the catch that it allows, it technically looks like a high degree of difficulty, but in reality, she's just able to be so comfortable, and the power transfer is just so smooth into these shots that it really reduces the amount of time that she needs to get them off. As far as the efficiency point, I think I have no qualms about the three-point shot. It's weird that she suddenly loses about 10 percentage points off of it, but you have a good sample size. She is still an excellent free throw shooter, so it's I think it's hard to say that there's really anything there, just other than maybe this is just someone who might have a little more volatility, but the baseline's still a very high level shooter. In terms of the overall efficiency, the numbers look good as they are. Her 2-point percentage is over 45% every season. Her sophomore year stats are kind of insane when you talk about her 2-point shooting. But as Lincoln mentioned, she really just doesn't get to the rim. She basically just does not get to the rim at all. And she has such a good feel for the mid-range that it doesn't matter a whole lot. But when you sort of compound that with the fact that she doesn't drop fouls much, she doesn't look for contact, and she's a good finisher, but she seems to have a tendency where she prefers to try to actually finish the shot, even if it makes for a harder degree of difficulty, rather than try to just draw the contact and get to the line. And I think for me, we'll talk about this when we get to the grade in our next segment. But for me, that's one of the things where I look at when I think about scale, when I think about how high a floor is, and it's a little concerning. It's not bad, but it does cap for me how in I can be on the efficiency.
All right, so after the break, we'll get into our scouting grade on Loyd. But first, let's talk about FanDuel. Snap into NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've ever been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA and visit to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel's official partner of the NFL. Welcome back. I'm your host, Hunter Cruse, and thanks for joining us. Let's get back into our scouting grade on Loyd, solely based on the film we watched prior to her WNBA career, taking into account the current state of the league rather than a current emphasis on team building philosophies. But as we mentioned, we're getting now into more modern day WNBA, more modern day schemes, and that's going to reflect our grades as well. So we use a baseball like 20/80 scouting scale. 40 is an average WNBA contributor, 45 is a top end backup, 50 is your average starter, 55 is an above average starter, 60 is an all-star caliber player, 70 is an all WNBA caliber player, and finally 80 is reserved for your MVP candidates. Basically first team all WNBA on a perennial basis. So first, I'll turn it to you, Lincoln, for your scouting grade on Loyd.
Yeah, for me, I'm a full grade higher on Jewell's defense than her offense. I think that she projects as like an all-W level defender from a pretty early time in her career. So if it was just based off of watching her defensively, I would give her defense a 70 grade, like a full all-W defense. And I'm a little bit lower, mainly on the offensive decision-making. If I believed that she was going to get 6 free throws a game in the WNBA, I would give her a full 70 grade. But nothing in her Notre Dame tape screams a bunch of free throws. So I have to go down to like a strong, solid 60. I think her basketball instincts and her basketball IQ is out of this world, but she can just get stuck in this rut of, I need to go take these difficult shots and make plays more difficult than they need to be, which is a little bit frustrating to watch, but she's really good at it.
Yeah, and I think we run into that issue. I think we run into that issue that Lincoln specifically described a lot with prospects. And I'll say off the top, like I said, when you're going in, I have the exact same grade on the overall skill set, or not on the overall skill set, on the offense. I have a 60 scorer or off-ball threat, whatever, and a 70 defender. Defensively, seems like a bang-on point of attack defender. Your profiles at the high end is one of the best #1 guard defenders in the league. The low end is still a very good guard defender who maybe there are some issues here and there, but there's still plus impact on and off the ball, which you just don't get from guards defensively. But yeah, for me it is some of the things you talked about offensively. The real things for me that it's less about where the ceiling is, because we know where the ceiling is. We saw what her junior year was, and we see, when she drains a bunch of mid-range shots in a row at Notre Dame, and when she's able to, weave through and get those just crazy finishes. But it's sort of where can I feel the low end is? And again, it's really hard to find a low end outcome that is higher than just a player who is good at hitting, who is good at, shooting threes, let's say like Danny Green, and also being, just like a really good back cutter. Other than that, like there is a floor there, and it's just that, which is a solid contributor, but it's nothing great. And it is for me, the things to bridge the gap between that floor and that ceiling for me are, being able to consistently get downhill because it's easier to finish at the rim. And it also means that you're not sort of creating your own shots, but you're also affecting the rest of the offense through something other than pure off-ball gravity. And again, she doesn't have that. And I don't see any reason to think that will come into her game, even though she clearly can. The finishing is good, but not great. She just takes way too many long pull-up twos instead of either getting downhill. She just doesn't have a good feel for getting downhill, and she's a very solid pick and roll operator, but I don't see any reason otherwise to think that she had more playmaking within her either, just in terms of that processing ability. Again, solid passer, very good floor game. Just that's the play. There's just not playmaking here really outside of a two-man game. For me, that's a hard 6. I can go high end 6 as well. I'd say hard 6, high end 6. It's about where I am with that.
Yeah, I kind of figured I would be the highest on Loyd.
Yeah, we
figured. I have a hard 70 on her. Like I'm really in on Jewell Loyd. Probably my favorite prospect from this series, just from an enjoyment standpoint. Maybe her, she make a Holtz call, but from her game, I don't have as much concerns about the downhill stuff. She averaged 6 free throw attempts per game in her junior year. She took 8 or more free throw attempts in 15 games. I thought the athleticism was all there for me. The only concern would probably be, like you guys mentioned, was the playmaking for me. I don't think she's a high-level playmaker, nowhere on the same tier as like Diana Taurasi, for example. So I wouldn't have her over DT, but I think around that is where I'm at on Jewell. And I believe in a lot of the skills translating. Even though she didn't really have a high-volume 3, I think as we see with prospects nowadays, you kind of move some of those deep 2s into 3s, which is what we eventually see with her career.
Yeah, and I think this and next week, I think are really the last batch of prospects. So Jewell and the Stewie-led trio of UConn players are really the last trio of players where looking at their overall stats is still kind of misleading compared to, current standards, because there are still just a whole bunch of NPC teams that fill the schedule. When we get to Kelsey Plum, number 1 overall pick in 2017, there's a lot of, it's the Pac-12 in the year of our Lord, 2016, 2017. So, there's some stuff in there, but at that point, she's still playing mostly teams. When you look at the rosters of players, you're like, oh, I know that name. She was a first-round pick. She was a first-round pick. You have this thing where the baseline just elevates so much, somewhere between, at least in college, it really is somewhere between 2015 and 2017. And, I think that makes it interesting in terms of just trying to consider Jewell in the context of watching her against, let's say, South Carolina when Asia's there, or UConn, versus, trying to contextualize that in the stats.
All right, so after the break, we'll talk about Loyd's WNBA career up to this point. We'll also get into some player comparisons, but first, here's a word from our sponsors. All right, so let's get into the player comparison section before we talk about how Loyd's career has transpired so far. I'll give it to you first, Lincoln.
Yeah. She's called the Gold Mamba, and she has more or less lived up to that. She's, I think, outperformed my grade on her. She just had a really, really solid scoring season as the number 1 option in Seattle. M disagrees the efficiency, but
you think she was bad?
She's a very, very good basketball player.
Yeah.
There's in her college game, there's a lot of that Mamba-esque thing. It's kind of 19-year-old Kobe. You see the really, really solid flashes of shot making, the high degree of difficulty, and the thing that separates Jewell from a lot of other shot making guards is that defense. She's timing these digs really well. She's a great off-ball helper. She's great chasing players around screens, and is just kind of a menace defensively in a way that a lot of these high-scoring guards aren't. And that's what separates her as a guard prospect who isn't like a singular offensive engine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have the same comp as far as the Kobe thing, and I think it extends even deeper than that. It's not just for me, young Kobe in there. I think it's really a lot of her career, especially in the W, has followed not the same trajectory, to be clear, but it's the same, concept of how do you factor in the trade-offs between offense and defense. Jewell's first couple seasons, the first one is just a terrible, truly horrendous Seattle team. I don't recommend watching it. Don't do that for your own health. That's the one that earns them Stewie. And her first couple years in the league too, it's very strange. She just doesn't know how to shoot threes. I don't really get she just misses open shots. It's kind of weird. She hits 30% of her threes those 2 years, and then suddenly remembers how to shoot threes at 36%, 38% the rest of her career. It's almost a very strange career to me for reasons you wouldn't expect, right? It's not like she's super volatile. She's actually incredibly consistent in so many areas. Her shooting percentages are effectively within 1 or 2 percentage points of each other every year in the W. Her estimated wins above replacement level, whether you're looking at LeBron from B-Ball Index or you're looking by EC from Positive Residual, it's basically the exact same band every year, 3.5 to 4.5 wins contributed based on the environment. This is a player who, we are actually in the era. This is the first, I think this is very obviously the first player we talked about in this entire series, where this is an era of WNBA basketball where everyone has an adjustment getting into the league. Nneka did not. Nneka was insanely efficient her rookie year in the league. Everyone else that we have talked about, obviously super efficient. BG and EDD were stars from the minute they stepped in on the court. BG was obviously going to be EDD, maybe took some people by surprise in that sense. But Jewell, it's a couple years to get up to speed. Even Stewie, she was a star her first year, but it's not the same 2016 to 2017. And I think in that sense, it creates a pretty interesting arc that we can look at just in terms of what that means for prospects that we're looking at here, and just how obvious it is that there is this sometime between 2014 and 2015 or 2013 to 2016, sometime in that range, there is just a sudden and massive gain in the baseline level of WNBA players. And I think in that sense, it's actually super impressive, I think, what Jewell Loyd does in her career, because she, I believe, is entering or just finished. I believe she's entering her age 30 season right now as we speak. And in that time, she has reeled off, I think, basically 4 years, 4 of those 5 or 6 seasons as, one of the W's best 3-and-D players of, frankly, all time. Part of that is because I think of the limited depth the W has when we're talking just about 3-and-D players, but also it's, Jewell is such a plus threat when it comes to Hunter, like you talked about, with the off-ball stuff. When we talked about Elena Beard, this is the same level of thing where it, plays up the skills, but where for Beard it established sort of a baseline where we could say, it's good enough we can get your defense on the court. For Jewell, she can affect it in so many ways. And it's just so much fun how that plays off of Sue Bird, who is, one of the smartest passers of all time, if not the smartest passer of all time, but also is one of the best off-ball threats in league history. And the way that works with Stewie, I mean, it's just so much fun. Like that's the thing about Jewell's career, is it's just so much fun to watch. And to circle back to the Kobe point, I think that's what happens, this past year is, Jewell, of the, 6 years since she really came into her own, 2 of them have been spent without Stewie. That was 2019, when she was basically the top guard on the team, second most used scorer on the team, and she wasn't really totally in her own at that point as an on-ball threat. And then you had this year, 2023. And again, the efficiency is not great this year. It's not great. She took a pretty notable hit, 30 percentage points of true shooting, basically from her career baseline to this season. But the big thing for me is it's the defensive trade-off. She was an somehow she hasn't gotten an all-defensive award. No one really. Yeah, Lincoln, I'm surprised too. No idea how that happened. We all thought she would get one in 2021, and then she didn't. But it is that interesting trade-off. The usage rate skyrockets from basically just last year to this year, and the efficiency goes down a little bit. But also, she was a pretty solidly below average to negative defender this year. And I think that's the thing people talk about with Kobe, right? Is he did so much offensively, there was basically nothing left to give defensively. And you could see, especially early in his career, when he wasn't taking on that usage, he was a good defender, genuinely. And I think that's the interesting thing that happened with Jewell this year is you're running into that sort of conundrum. Obviously, it'd be nice if she went back to what it was before. That requires Seattle surrounding her with more talent. I think, in terms of my comps for her, just as a prospect, sort of going out of order here. No, I think the more modern one, the more obvious one, is I think she's kind of just like a guard version of Ryan Howard, honestly. Like the help contributions are so far ahead of what you'd expect of a player at her position. Killer off-ball threat, comes into her own, or in the case of Ryan, hoping she comes into her own as sort of a pull-up threat. But the lack of super duper playmaking and the lack of just getting downhill at all really limits sort of the offensive projection. And then, for the other old heads out there, I think it's pretty similar to if Katie Douglas just was 2 inches shorter. Fun threat in similar ways. Is a much better defender than you'd even expect, just sort of on the face of it. And just a fun player, solid number 2 or number 3 on a title team.
All right. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Join the team at the next week for continued coverage of the WNBA Women's Basketball as a whole. To recap, our consensus scouting grade on Loyd was a hard 60, around a 60 grade. Next week, you can join us back on Saturday for a historical scouting report on Brianna Stewart out of UConn. Have a great weekend, everyone.